We're going, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with a very, very talented man, intellectual savant, kooky, rocker. This is my boy, Noah. Noah, thank you so much for chilling with me. I'm a big fan of Noah's podcast, Bulwarg Disclosure Podcast. So Noah and I are at very similar, I think we actually both have 12 episodes out.
Yeah.
So we both have the exact same amount of episodes out. So there is a lot of really dense information in your podcast. So I wanted to just plug it however I could. And I'm just going to ask you a couple questions about highlights, who you like talking to the most, maybe some key takeaways. Starting out, I would say I can tell from you're pulling from, you have a foundation of knowledge. So here. So in case anyone isn't familiar with it, let me explain it a little bit. So Noah will go through, Noah will trace organized crime, history of international organized crime, general conspiracy stuff. You get into a lot of, I loved the episodes about dark side of psychedelics, tracing the influence of intelligence agencies onto what was the counterculture of the 60s going into the 70s, really taking a skeptical analytic look at how culture is being driven by nefarious forces and how some of these things weren't as organic as they purport to be. And that I really think this body of knowledge is really important for other artists and other musicians, because I'm sure you can relate to this when you're growing up and you have your band and everything. You're looking at, or here, let me speak for myself and I'll see if you agree. You're looking at all the bands that influenced you and all the media that influenced you, and you compare yourself to other things and you think, oh, well, this is what I would think, oh, well, a rock band would be at this level and this is how, and when you realize that wasn't organic, Beatlemania or something, when you realize this wasn't they took the country by storm and there was something about the collective unconscious that really resonated with them. But then there's an organic fire there. But then these intelligence agencies are throwing a lot of gas on the fire so they 100%. Can circumvent these artists and circumvent their position. So you've had a lot of really intelligent people on, and you've had really informationally dense conversations with them that are fucking awesome. So where should I begin? The podcast is phenomenal.
Thank you, dude.
Some of my favorites. I've watched, I believe, 7 out of 12 of them. So let's just start off with how you got into it. So You and I are both at 12 episodes. We probably started around the same time. Can you talk about how did you start doing it? Mm-hmm. Get into a little bit, and then how you got into contact with these people. Because I was surprised that some of them were so willing to talk to someone who you and I don't have any credentials.
I was surprised too. I was totally surprised by most of them, actually. And I mean, you've been in the music scene much longer than I have. I mean, you've definitely got your roots, a lot deeper.
Unfortunately.
Your roots are a lot deeper than mine are on the music scene. And when I got it, I've always liked heavy music. I've always listened to metal and stuff. But I've never had really had the inclination to try to make music. So when I had that, I mean, when I started Bulwarg, as a musical project, 3-4 years ago now. It started mostly as that. Like, I mostly just wanted to make songs that I would want to listen to, stuff that I was just kind of ripping off the shit that I was listening to at that time,
totally.
The kind of death metal. And then it went from that to, kind of a solo thing. It got a few guys that wanted to play with me. So then it turned into more than just, a basement type of project or whatever. And I've always been interested in the, political skepticism, conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it, that type of stuff, history just in itself. I've always been really into that. So that really existed before the musical stuff did. But then I realized once I started putting out music, getting an online follow, a small following, putting stuff out there, I realized I could kind of piggyback off of that and do more about stuff that I care about.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, I love music, massive part of my life. But this other stuff I care about a lot more. The music's almost kind of like a second thought to activism isn't the right word, but whatever you would want to call it, talking about these things that I think are important. So like when I was thinking about doing the first episode is with Tom O'Neill, who wrote Chaos, the book about Charles Manson from 2019 that's gotten really, really popular, and has kind of opened up this dialectic around psychedelics and the 60s and the CIA and all these things that had been pretty fringe topics. A lot of people know about MK Ultra,
Sure.
but it took it to a whole new mainstream level, I think.
I think people know about MK Ultra as I think they like it as an extreme mythological thing, but I don't think that they're critically thinking about, I think most people believe it ended.
Yeah.
And most people are naive to the extent of social engineering going on. So I think people buy into that MK Ultra as like a really flashy thing, because we go, here we have on paper the government doing Clockwork Orange, stuff we've seen in movies about, Manchurian Candidate. We've been primed for this from mainstream sources. And I think, not to interrupt you, but people know about it, but I don't think they are even close to understanding what the real implications are of it.
And his book, especially, I think it put it's an actually academic study of it. It's not a conspiracy book. It's if you read the book, it's filled with sources, and I mean it's pretty unbelievable the links he went to and the things he uncovered. That if we didn't have, there wouldn't be, I don't think, this like an academic study of MK Ultra like there is with that in the Manson case also. But that was kind of the impetus for me, because I wanted to start either writing about those types of things or putting out something. And I thought, like I had already gone back and forth in emails with Tom O'Neill for a while. And I was like, I would love to talk to him more about this. I have questions. I have my own ideas about it and stuff. So I just got the idea to do a podcast and reached out and asked if he would be willing to do an episode. And it all kind of started from there. And then the next guest was another Manson-related dude, Nicholas Schreck, who knew Charles Manson and was involved in all these weird, like, occult bands and stuff in the 90s. He was married to Anton LaVey's daughter, Zena LaVey. So this guy was, involved in these very weird, spooky, intelligence adjacent scenes. So he kind of provides like an alternative perspective of it to Tom O'Neill's. They kind of like have a beef almost. Their
Could
theories
you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So O'Neill's theory boiled down, the chaos narrative, you might call it, is that Charles Manson was essentially a product of social engineering, and specifically MK Ultra in the Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco area, because Tom was able to find correspondence between a guy named Jolly West, who worked at this clinic in San Francisco that Charles Manson attended, and we know all of this is proven. He can put them in the same building essentially. He found correspondence between this guy Jolly West, who was an MK Ultra doctor that worked at UCLA, and Sidney Gottlieb, who was, basically like the architect of MK Ultra. So he found this correspondence between them. He was able to establish the fact that Jolly West was actually involved in these things. And then he connected that to Manson because Jolly West worked at the same clinic that Manson and his girls and stuff would attend. So they go to this place, and his thesis, I guess, would be that Charles Manson was groomed and used. He was as people colloquially say, MK Ultra. So that's his side of things.
Before you go into the thing, I always think about this, and I think it's important for any conspiracy theorist to always ask. You always have to weigh. I'm sure or I can speak for myself. When you first get into conspiracies, it's really easy to say everything's a conspiracy but it's what I'm talking about is it ignorance, like a naive ignorance, or is it that nescience, that conscious nescience? Is it an idiot who's doing dangerous things,
or nefarious intent,
or is it an evil genius kind of thing? Right. So I remember it took me a while to develop more nuance in my thought. I always have to ask myself the question. We were even just having when we were talking about mainstream people, Candace, Tucker, is it that the human delivering it is maybe a little bit naive and is naive to the powers over him, and they are not critical thinking people who are just taking orders, or are they really the people who are who really know what's up, that are genuinely evil? So to continue, so I'm assuming you're going to say Tom's thesis is that Charles Manson was more of a victim. He coming from a naive background, and then Schreck's. That's how you say it?
Yeah, Nicholas Schreck. Well, that is Tom's. And Tom doesn't really draw any like final conclusions in the book. Like, if I would say anybody go read the book, but he kind of leaves it open, you know, whether Manson was aware of this or if he was kind of a useful idiot, you know? But Nick's point of view is that he thinks that all the MK Ultra stuff is bullshit. None of that can possibly be true. Charles Manson wasn't. He didn't know Jolly West. He wasn't being, you know, experimented on, and that the whole Tate LaBianca murders happened because of basically like a drug deal going wrong, which my view is that both can be true at the same time, because all the stuff that Nicholas is talking about, the drug deals, the pornography, all the stuff that was going on around, you know, the Polanski residence and with Charles Manson, the family or whatever, that is true. All that stuff is true. But Tom's work is true as well. And the connections between West, Gottlieb, and Manson, you can't deny those. And putting West and Manson in the same building, I think, is really the nail in the coffin too.
That's what I mean. I think if anyone is listening to this that is not already into conspiracies but is open to it, I think it's important to say how you can take this. So I think people who aren't into this kind of skepticism, the intelligence agencies have done a fantastic job of vilifying conspiracy theories. Even the title, conspiracy theorist, from that. But people are getting exposed to this kind of information that aren't really doing research. They're getting exposed to this information from their QAnon uncle, from their Christian fundamental. They're hearing it from people that don't have a strong academic background, or from people that don't have, you know, a really just solid foundational work. You're hearing it from people that you can tell have a particular emotional disposition to things like paranoia or whatever. You know, when you hear a QAnoner or a Christian fundamentalist obsessed with the adrenochrome stories, you're starting with the most sensationalist piece and trying to sell that to someone else just based on the emotional sensationalism of it. And to people who don't have a predisposition to that, it just pushes them away. But what we're talking about is there are CIA documents on the CIA website that anyone can go and check. That's what I love about people like Whitney Webb. This has nothing to do with fundamentalism. This is like objective facts that you can get straight from the source. So I agree with you that probably how does that make any sense if we can prove that we have correspondence between Jolly West and Sidney Gottlieb? Listen, is it maybe not the smokingest gun? Sure, I understand there could be a debate, but come on. Like,
that was kind of the impetus for me wanting to do it. What you're talking about there is because, you know, just the word conspiracy, and it's been kind of, like you said, demonized or weaponized against people who essentially are just trying to think critically and look at everything instead of just a very small portion of a event or something that happened or whatever. So that's kind of what I wanted to do, was authors that I read or journalists or people's work that I liked, you know, and I think put a really good, cohesive, critical, you know, analysis of something, talk to them and get them on the podcast so that they're kind of, you know, basically I just wanted to talk to people that I was interested in, that I thought did good work, and be able to have them kind of talk about their, whatever it is, like Tom O'Neill, the Charles Manson stuff.
And these are guys that come with receipts. They come with citations. This isn't, my schizophrenic uncle or whatever. This is people that like are either academics that were tangentially related to intelligence agencies, or maybe they were journalists or people that were interested, but they have fucking receipts. This is not, I channeled it, which is a whole nother avenue. So let's keep going. If you can remember the episodes, quiz to go in order. Those two I never got to, but I definitely listened to. Do you remember who was third?
Let's see. I think that was the first one with John Kiriakou.
Okay.
Who was a CIA whistleblower.
So John Kiriakou is the only man who's ever been sentenced for the 9/11 torture program.
Yes.
And it's not because he was doing it; it's because he blew the whistle on it. So this is a guy. This is a CIA operative who was in prison for blowing the whistle on all this. You know what I mean? This is not this is not conspiracy theory. This is all there's a paper trail of everything that's in the legal system.
No, he was prosecuted, and spent time in prison. And like you said, not for torturing people, but rather for tattling on the government for doing that. So, so
this is not like this guy has credentials.
Exactly.
This is not like This is not something more vague. So I listened to both conversations with Kiriakou. Kiriakou I thought was brilliant. I would love to talk to him myself. Kiriakou, dropped a lot of good knowledge on there. Do you remember anything from the conversations you had with him that you enjoyed?
A lot of times we talk about just kind of current events type of stuff,
things
that are going on. I think the first one that was around the time that the first Trump assassination attempt happened sometime last year. So I think we touched on that a little bit. And then the most recent time we talked a lot about, what's going on in the Middle East, in Israel. I think
he was spot on about Israel, and he wasn't partisan or whatever.
And I also respect about him, his story doesn't ever change.
Yeah.
If you've read his book or if you listen to him in other podcasts and stuff, it doesn't ever change. It always stays the same. The people, the places, the things he talks about experiencing, it's always consistent. And also I think his, viewpoints on things are very consistent too. I just find him to be a very credible guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was because I just saw him on Tucker's 9/11 series. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I was like, that's fucking amazing that this guy is willing to sit down and talk to you for an hour multiple times.
Yeah,
with no. Do any of these guys come at you with, I need money or I need anything?
That was one of the things I've been really surprised about. They're all really willing to talk. Some of them seem almost kind of like eager to almost maybe a little surprised that they're being reached out to even.
Yeah.
I think some of them just don't expect younger people to be interested in those types of things, So a number of them have been like, hell yeah, I'm happy to talk to you.
And that's the other thing that blows my mind is you can tell, what I'll say is I think you can tell these people's integrity by how little ego they have involved in it. They don't ask for money. They don't ask for reciprocation. I doubt they asked you how many subscribers you got.
Yeah, no.
How many followers you got.
Never.
You know what I mean? They just gave their time to do that. This guy did prison, was a CIA, you know what I mean? He's happy to talk to you. What is there? I mean, it's just, again, you want to take apart some of the arguments, they'd be happy to engage in that with you.
Yes.
So to anyone if someone wants to watch that and say, I got a big problem with this, but the consistency, the integrity, I think is palpable from what they're talking about. So again, what you've done is fucking awesome because it's motivated me just because I didn't realize you could reach out to these people. And there's a bit part of a concerning where I was naive. I was like, oh, surely there's people who love Danny Jones or Joe Rogan that want to reach out to these guys. And that's not going on. So we should keep doing it in that regard.
Yeah, I have such a problem with some of those types of people, even like Danny Jones, just because the people that they platform and have on, they have so many different people with so many different conflicting, viewpoints and stuff.
Yeah.
But it always seems like they're just on there to advertise what that person has to say. They never really argue with them or push back on them or anything. I'd like to have somebody on mine that I disagree with. For the most part, I've had people that I agree with for the most part on what we're talking about. I'd love to have somebody on that I'm diametrically opposed to with what they say. I tried to get this one guy on named John Atack. He's an ex-Scientologist, and I think he wrote a few books on it and stuff. And he goes on podcasts and talks about Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard and these kind of lesser talked about aspects of it.
Yeah.
But where he really loses credibility for me is he talks about Dr. Jolly West, the guy that we've talked about from the Chaos book. And he just pretty much glazes the dude and is like, oh, he was a saint, and all this criticism of him is totally unfounded. And again, he's just arguing against facts.
So going into that, anyone who's familiar with that, so we are guys that have definitely taken a lot of psychedelics, and me and my band, I'm saying, so it was an absolute ace in the hole when we'd be hanging out with deadheads and we'd say, are you familiar with John Atwill? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When we would pull out that Manufacturing the Deadhead, because people would have, you talk to fried hippie types, and they like to think that they're being anti-authoritarian because they eat Ben and Jerry's or something like that. Right. So for guys like us who like always wanted to have an intellectual leg up, that article, that Manufacturing the Deadhead from Atwill, was foundational for me as well. That definitely made the rounds between me and my friends. One of the first things we did, because just intuitively we could tell like there's something up with this Grateful Dead shit, because we, like I said, so I have friends that, I had a whole group of friends that moved out to around Boulder area when weed was first legalized.
Same.
So then they would be going to weed company parties, and they would be getting dosed and stuff. And I was like, you know what I mean? Where like, and I was like, you went somewhere and they fucking slipped you 10 hits of acid and you weren't like ready to fucking kill someone. Like I was like, I would be having a bad time if that happened to me. So I was like, there's even something nefarious, even at the lowest level. And I'm not saying like these guys like got paid by an intelligence agency or anything.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not saying like these are guys that just learn this shit from the culture they're involved in, but you could tell there's a serious nefarious element to this modern hippie culture, especially Deadhead stuff. So if you could give a little bit of, if you have any highlights from the Atwill interview. Atwill was awesome, and he really outlined, hey, here is where, if anyone's interested in this, Atwill does a really fantastic job of outlining specifically the intelligence agency's involvement with the 60s counterculture, which gets into distributing psychedelics, making that a bit more of a non-organic social movement. That's amazing. You got to talk to him, and he was glazing you a little bit.
Yeah, Joe's awesome. I love Joe. And just like you, reading that Manufacturing the Deadhead article for the first time, it's like a light bulb just went off. Also, that article and Dave McGowan's Weird Scenes in the Canyon book.
And that was one of the first things I saw. I never read the full book, but there was a series of articles. Because we were all into that. So
it started off as like a series of articles before he made it as a full book.
So I saw that at the time. I have to get the book because I would love to talk to him as well.
He's dead. Dave's dead now. Yeah, I know. Dave
McGowan.
He's like a dream guest, but Joe's about the next best thing, because I mean their work overlaps quite a bit, I would say.
Okay, so again, if anyone wants to follow this that isn't familiar, they both have outlined this Grateful Dead, and then there is the Laurel Canyon scene refers to people that were involved. We're talking Jim Morrison, whose father was involved in the USS. It was the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the false flag incident.
Stephen Morrison, his dad,
And then we have Frank Zappa, whose father came from military intelligence. And then these people are also were related to what you were talking about with Roman Polanski and the Sharon Tate murders. All these things are coming from the same kind of nexus of this South California 60s movement. Could you give
heavy military presence?
Heavy military presence because again, I'll never forget when I was 11 years old, I was obsessed with the Beatles, and I had this big Beatles anthology book. It was a beautiful book, and I'll never forget, once it gets to their psychedelic era, I was very young, probably more so 10 or 11, and I remember reading, they would just say, oh, like the first time I took LSD, it was phenomenal, like whatever. So I grew up buying that story that this was, we came from such a authoritarian patriarchal culture in the 50s. Naturally we would have swayed over to this way. And there is some truth in that naturally there's always a dialectic. There's always a dialectic where everyone wants to rebel against the previous social order, but this was put on steroids. So is there anything from Atwill?
What Dave's book especially does is point out that it's not just a couple coincidences where these mega stars from the 60s and the hippie music culture had parents who were military intelligence. It wasn't just a couple coincidences. It was almost every one of them. You know, that's what he lays out in the book, you know, like the ones you talked about, Zappa and Jim Morrison, even like James Taylor, Jackson, but like pretty much everybody in that scene. So, I mean, the way I look at it, and if you boil down Atwill and McGowan's work, really it just shows, you know, during that time, all the political turbulence during the 50s and 60s and stuff, the anti-war movements, there was so much that the government had to fight against as far as as counterculture, you know, dissident youth movements and anti-war movements and stuff, the Black Panthers. There was so much, and they were actually, they pretty much viewed the public and the youth as a bigger threat than, you know, another country's military.
Which is crazy to think of now.
Yes, exactly.
Because we're so dumbed down that we would never even think of ourselves as having the capacity.
Well, I think that's just a continuation of those projects, why people are so stupid and stuff now, you know, but it makes sense when you look at, like, for example, Atwill or McGowan's work, you know, what better way to get people, you know, distracted or not caring about political change or protesting the war and stuff, introducing these bands, this music into the culture, and at the same time injecting it with the drugs that they were putting out, you know.
And not even the drugs, but the nihilistic attitude around the drugs.
Yes,
because they would, like,
the whole,
you know,
sex, drugs, rock and roll.
It's because as someone who I've definitely used a lot of psychedelics, and they've been foundational to my understanding, but I've really overdone it, and it's really it's a difficult path to go down. I only say that because I do believe it's important from my perspective that the perspective is represented, that I do believe psychedelics have the potential for healing, but it needs to be in a system that the psychedelics need to be administered in a system where therapeutic, psychiatry, psychology, all these things are accounted for. It is not a cure-all, and if you are getting into it for naive escapism, as I have done, you're going to make it worse because you are getting under the hood of your psyche, and you have absolutely the opportunity to really be messing with things that you are not prepared to mess with if you're just trying to go to a concert or whatever. This is real deal shit. And yes, in the right set and setting, I think the people who are adequately preparing the public to use responsibly, there's a whole system to follow of that. But you need to be involved in therapeutic work. You need to be involved. You need to be emotionally intelligent. You need to have these characteristics. It's so funny. I've interviewed multiple people now on the podcast, just coincidentally, J-Dog, some other guys, definitely some guys that have used gear, used steroids. But thankfully they always say something along the lines of, I remember when I asked J-Dog, he says, you need to be going in the gym like it's a fucking candy store, because you're so excited to do all the exercises before you even think about that. Now, I'm not a steroid guy really under any circumstance, but what they're saying is, if you're a guy who doesn't work out and you want to use steroids to mitigate that, you're gonna grow tits and you're gonna be a hysterical this is not a shortcut. Now, can some of these things be good adjuncts to real, sincere, earnest inner work? I believe so, but you need to put that out there. So yeah, when we see this counterculture movement, I would say we know from the Life magazine article from Wasson, and we saw that obvious, and then even with Albert Hoffman's synthesis of LSD, we find out he has ties to IG Farben.
Right.
So we have to say, there was obviously a concerted effort, from intelligence agencies to seed the public with this.
Of course, yeah.
And they were probably intelligent enough to know, like, listen, after all this war stuff, after whatever, we're going to have some rebellion. So how do we neutralize this rebellion?
Exactly. Yeah, a good parallel is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And I think a lot of people look at Huxley as like this anti-establishment kind of.
That's what I thought too
hero.
when I read in school. I read
Yep.
1984, Animal Farm, Brave New World, Clockwork Orange, and
Yep.
you think you're presented with that as, oh no, this is social critique. This is a warning.
Yeah. Well, Huxley's family, he came from a family of eugenicists and, very establishment. He wasn't, I think people look at it like, oh, he was telling us what was going to happen. He was, trying to warn people. But I don't really, I look at it more as he was just kind of almost braggadociously, laying out the blueprint, saying, this is what's going to happen. Eventually the government is going to know that it's more effective to use, narcotics and social conditioning as a tool against the public than war and bullets and real weapons and stuff. So he wasn't saying that to warn people in the future. He was just putting it out there because he could. These things were going to happen regardless of whether the public understood or knew it or not. And just like you're saying, psychedelics can certainly have their, I absolutely believe they can be used for beneficial things on the individual level. But when they were introducing LSD and other drugs like that into the public in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't for that reason. They weren't putting it out there to help people. They were putting it out there along with the other, other things like the music that went kind of hand in hand and the rock shows and stuff like that. They were putting it out there to make sure that people were, distracted and doing other things. In the MK Ultra literature, they refer to like the ideal outcome of this type of conditioning as a navel gazer, someone who would basically just sit around and stare at their belly button. And if you've been to a dead show, someone like that. Exactly. When people take psychedelics, and not that you can't have profound experiences, but you can take psychedelics, sit in your room for 3 days and think that you've, had these incredibly profound experiences, but you really haven't. All you've done is just sit on the couch. You haven't left your house. And it's very easy to neutralize a political movement or, actual counterculture rebellion against, a fascist government by doing that. And I think it, where we are today with social media and the internet and stuff. Timothy Leary famously said that the internet would be the LSD of the future. And I think that's totally true. I mean, they've figured out ways to keep the public stupefied and distracted, and especially with, politically divided down the party lines, and keeping people mad at each other, essentially, so that they never identify a common enemy, which is the oligarchs and the people that are, benefit from keeping us controlled and subdued. It really, I have to say, it really did break my heart when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Not even so much that. What really broke my heart was seeing people's reaction to it, and how many people were happy to see it when it was like, this is not a high level guy. What it showed, this was a high level useful idiot for people like Israel and stuff, but this is a media guy. There's people that are, and I'm not even going to advocate for putting a bullet in Bill Gates or Netanyahu, because I think we need to evolve as a society to, we need to learn to take accountability for ourselves and to hold other people properly accountable, and that doesn't happen with an assassination. But all I'm saying is, it would be way more justified to assassinate Netanyahu than someone like Charlie Kirk. And it made me sad because I saw how partisan everyone had become. It took something like that to see where I was like, this is so sad, because we, whether left or right, we agree on the overwhelming majority of things, and we're so obsessed with minutia over delivery of messages. Charlie Kirk said some stupid stuff. He said plenty of stuff, I thought was insightful or whatever, but regardless, this guy was coming from where, he thought was right from a Christian background. I'm not a Christian fundamentalist. So, and there was definitely times where he said edgy shit, like he said, Japan deserved Pearl Harbor. Obviously was having an edgelord Twitter moment, where he was like, oh, well, I'll get you pissed off. That's not insightful to say that, but no, to celebrate this guy going out, it's like, if we're celebrating this guy going out, then we don't even know who the true people are, who the true people that are keeping us down are. And it goes beyond partisanship. That scared me a lot, because it reminded me, I think the parallels between what's happening right now and what was happening, during the Vietnam War, and when MK Ultra and those types of, social conditioning projects really took full force, we're at a similar place right now too, where people are, I think, at the precipice of being able to look, over the party lines and actually agree on things.
Because look at Israel right now.
I think that's the main one.
No one under 40 is supporting Israel right now, and it's left. And that's what made me so sad about the Charlie Kirk thing. Is I was like, we are on the same page here, and now we're fighting.
Now we have another thing to be split about again.
When it's like Charlie, he makes fucking TikToks. Like, it doesn't affect your life like what's going on in Israel does. Yeah. It does. He's not like, it was just small fry, and it was just
100%.
It made me sad, because I know what they don't want is people on the left and people on the right. Now that with social media and everything with Israel, you know what I mean? We at least have something that goes beyond partisanship.
Yeah, well, the PR and the propaganda and the Hasbara can only work for so long. And when it's been 2 years of people seeing, children and families being decimated brutally, technologically.
And to see these guys bragging about it.
Exactly. They can only convince us that what we're seeing with our own eyes isn't actually happening for so long. Mm-hmm. So I think we're at that place. That's why I said it scares me, because, in the 60s, when those similar things were happening, when everyone was agreeing, why are we fighting this? Why is the Vietnam War happening? All these different things that people were actually uniting about.
Yeah.
That's when they went full force with the psy-ops, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm like, what are they going to roll out next? Because we're at a precipice of radical change, I think, right now politically. Not just the Israel thing, lots of other things, but I think that's the main catalyst, or will be the main catalyst for it.
It's the thing that's organically worked out to go beyond any kind of partisanship, where the propaganda doesn't even work. Leftists hate it, and any right-wing person under 40 hates it. The only people that are buying it are legacy media slop consumers.
Boomers and...
people the people that are still watching mainstream news are the only people that buy into that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's awesome. I really hope we can just come together more to share information, and it doesn't have to be, the media has primed us to be so vicious to each other and to hate someone we hate each other for we agree on 98% of things and then hate each other for the other 2%. And it's just really disheartening to see that. As I'm with you in that I feel my mission is to help disseminate empowering information to people. And when I saw that, I just saw the disempowered, I saw deeper into the extent of the disempowerment of people.
Totally.
And I really hope we can grow together to just be able to share information. And it's just like, dude, like any real academic, any real person that's approaching these kind of conversations in earnest will be happy to be proven wrong. If you come with receipts, I would love to look at it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I like having my viewpoint challenged. Mm-hmm. I think of it as like, when I get to have discourse, especially with someone I disagree with,
you grow.
It's like gym for my brain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We get to have those conversations, and I just wish we could talk to each other more. And that's, I'm so happy to talk to you, talk to the
same.
You know what I mean? I love
Absolutely.
the people, but yeah, we really need to like get our act together for like really understanding that, there's people on social media, and I've acted like a dick on social media. You know what I mean? Like everyone's had a bad day.
Who hasn't?
But there's people that are really committing genocides in this world.
Yes.
There's people that are really like, that have the blood of millions on their hands.
Exactly.
That wasn't Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
If you ask me, you know what I mean?
And even when it first happened, I remember feeling, I remember feeling almost like, this is a guy who goes out there, and I don't know if his mission is to divide people necessarily, but I think ultimately these partisan, influencers or whatever you want to call them, I think ultimately that is what they do. So when it first happened, I kind of had a hard-hearted view of it, and I felt like, if that's what you're going to be out there doing, working on behalf of the establishment of the oligarchs, like you're kind of putting yourself out there, and I get you might get what's coming to you.
Well, especially with, he ironically died talking about gun violence.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? You live by the sword, you die by the sword.
Exactly.
I can totally respect
that. But at the
that.
same time, like right after I felt that, I felt the same thing that you're talking about now, where it's like, oh shit, just when people were finally starting to kind of see eye to eye on something that actually matters, that transcends the party lines, we have something else that's, pitted neighbors against each other, pitted, families
over
against
superficialities.
Exactly.
Over just total superficialities.
Yeah.
So getting back to, I didn't even mean to get into the Charlie Kirk thing, but it was just a very, it was a sad moment for me to see. I mean, in both people, like, I'm not even talking about the people that, like, I was really sad at people celebrating it. It was also really embarrassing to see people on the right turn into nuclear Karens. I'm not even talking about that. Turn into nuclear Karens, where now they are the cancel culture, and that's pathetic to the people on the right. So I'm not saying just the people on the left. What we saw. This was MK Ultra, is when you have an extremely traumatic impetus, and now people's typical personas are 180 degrees, where now we have super edgelord leftist guys and super nuclear Karen right-wing guys. You know what I mean? Where they're calling all the leftist people
trying to get them fired.
And listen,
the freedom of speech people.
The freedom of speech people shit the bed. And now, and I was just like, oh, this sucks, because now you don't have a leg to stand on anymore because you're a hypocrite. Because I'm all about free speech and anti-cancel culture, except when it's convenient to me. So it's like people on both. I was disillusioned with both sides. I'm not even saying I was just disillusioned with the left, but that was so embarrassing. And it just shows how much trauma can change how we're acting when we're in that mode. Like, we would have thought, oh, that was the virtue of the right. It goes all out the window when you throw something traumatic enough at it. We didn't have the integrity to stand up against that. So I've digressed a bit. Let's go back to, you were talking with, what is Fort's first name?
Robert Forte. Yeah.
So Robert Forte, his was fucking awesome too. Yeah. He studied with Stanislav Grof, who developed holotropic breath work. So this guy was very involved in the psychedelic movement, but came at this from a bit of a purer angle. And he was a great dialectic with Atwill. Because Atwill was coming at it from a much more cautious standpoint, where Atwill's view on psychedelics was that he felt
Forte's.
No. Atwill's view was, don't take psychedelics under any circumstance because of the nefarious origins of the way it was introduced socially. Now, but with that, and then Forte brought in the knowledge of, yes, we can trace back any introduction of psychedelics into the common consciousness through intelligence agencies, but there have been niche shamanistic or indigenous cultures that have used this, and the majority of shamanic and indigenous cultures that participated in medicines, the overwhelming majority of them did not use psychedelic medicines. So that's kind of another thing that gets co-opted, where you talk to someone who's really bullish on it, they'll say, well, every Indian has taken mushrooms for the past 5,000 years, and it's really, I believe it's only about 20% of them actually use mind alter. I
wouldn't be surprised if it's less than that even.
Something like, usually they did things like drumming, or they had more natural ways of inducing altered states of consciousness. So those guys agreed with each other on 98% of things, but it was a good dialectic where you hosted two people that had two different, they both had a lot of involvement with the psychedelic movement, but came to different conclusions based on their experiences. Do you remember anything from Forte?
Yeah, I think his story is fascinating. I mean, the people and the places that he's been, he studied under Timothy Leary. Leary was almost like a father figure to him, and Gordon Wasson, who would kind of popularized the psilocybin mushroom in America. What I found really interesting about him is that after working so closely with these people and being so involved in the psychedelic renaissance, you might call it, in the 80s and 90s when he was really involved, is that coming out of it, his perspective now on it is looking back and seeing how much these people were being, utilized without their knowledge for a lot of the time to propagate these new, sometimes new like LSD, sometimes old like psilocybin, but nevertheless foreign substances and psychedelics to the public that was totally unprepared to have them, foisted into their lives,
Oh my God. I mean, and that's even still right now, the main problem with it is that it's all about take psychedelics. No one talks about integrate it.
Yeah.
Like you said, like you could have the most enlightening experience.
Yes.
How do you integrate that
What
into
do you
your
do with
daily
it?
life?
Yeah,
it
exactly.
doesn't count for shit.
Exactly.
When you have too much of that, that's the guy who doesn't leave his house.
Exactly.
Or that's
yeah.
it doesn't do shit. It makes you more reclusive.
And for the most part, people that are using psychedelic drugs frequently or really, into these different scenes, counterculture scenes or music scene, deadheads, whatever it is, typically these people are not politically active. Typically these people are, that's the primary focus of their life. Or it's it's a larger element than anything else. So a population that's too busy, tripping or taking drugs or going to music festivals and stuff. They don't have any time to organize politically. They don't represent any type of threat to the establishment. That's the whole reason why these projects were introduced.
And they don't have any guidance from anyone who has any deep understanding of psychology.
True.
That's to actually, because what would happen is we could tell from studies on psychedelics, they really increase neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What happens when you make your brain super neuroplastic and then binge Netflix and nitrous and Little Caesar's pizza?
Yeah.
You're helping them make you dumber.
Yes.
Now, if you do that and you're the person who can dictate your actions because you have some discipline, then adding that neuroplasticity might help you rewire some bad habits.
Sure.
But that needs to be really intentionally curated. You're not going to just go to a concert and come back with your emotional work done because you binged out on MDMA at a show or something. It is like, people think that's the end of it. That's the beginning of the process. So yeah, I just, as a person who has a lot of experience on both sides of that, I really damaged myself doing psychedelics, but I've also had really pivotal perspective changes. It's important to me that I clarify that.
Totally. I feel the same way. Yeah.
So Forte had real, and even look at, if anyone watches the Forte one, I would recommend anyone watch it, but he really showed how much nuance you have to have if you want to engage with critical thinking like this, with how complex of a character Timothy Leary was.
Absolutely.
Because it was one, there's no easy way to just say, oh, well, he was CIA, everything he said was wrong.
Right.
Or, I like psychedelics, everything he said was right.
Exactly.
It's so complicated because these are human people. It gets so complicated where even you have to really do your research to find that. And I do think, Kiriakou said, oh, if you immediately write off anyone who is CIA, it's intellectual laziness. I agree. It's never going to be that black and white, because I know people that are into conspiracy theories too, but that go off the deep end of anyone who ever engaged, they would write off someone
totally.
They would say, oh, well, Forte knew Timothy Leary.
So
we can't listen to him. That's lazy, if you ask me. So
I agree.
I think that was important that Kiriakou is the one who said that's intellectual laziness to immediately write someone off. But this gets complicated.
Yeah, exactly. It all has to be looked at really nuanced. Because even like Leary, he wasn't aware the entire time that he was being taken advantage of by these agencies. It was only later, I think, in his life when he realized that. And there's some interviews with him where he says, looking back, I realized that pretty much all of my actions were being dictated by the CIA. And, I was out there promoting these new drugs, and I was giving it to my students and stuff and helping to popularize it, kind of be this patron saint of LSD, people call him. And even he didn't realize that at that time that he was being taken advantage of.
And that's why, to anyone who's into this, you're not doing yourself a favor by looking at someone like that as this evil overlord who did all his evil in pure consciousness. You're taking the human element out of it. Yeah, and it's taking you further away from connecting with other people, because it's reinforcing, like I said, the people who really gravitate towards, especially the more outlandish conspiracy theories, typically have a predisposition to paranoia. So they're doing, the whole point of it, of being into stuff like this and critical thinking, is to be able to widen your perspective. And these people are using it to reinforce the perspective they already have when you're not willing to engage with the nuance of it.
Not to mention the way that, nowadays conspiracy thinking or whatever you want to call it is like a very popular mainstream type of thing, and the way that it's been weaponized against the public. I think a good example that I like to talk about sometimes is, when all the QAnon stuff started happening. And this was also, if people remember, this was around the same time that the WikiLeaks things were happening. This is around the same time that Jeffrey Epstein and, the Maxwell stuff was coming to light in the public eye. So they come out with these theories and these things that they're pushing about, blood drinking and adrenochrome and child trafficking and all these things that are essentially meant to discredit from legitimate actual things that were happening, that we know with the blackmail rings and stuff and Robert Maxwell and all the things that were happening that were real. But now because they put these ideas into the public consciousness about lizards and Hillary Clinton drinking baby's blood and stuff, it essentially takes away the validity of the real things that were happening, so that anybody, you bring up Jeffrey Epstein or something like that, they automatically would associate that with, QAnon stuff.
Sure.
So it's a way of neutralizing discussion about things that are actually legitimate.
I will say I never got anything even close to a satisfactory explanation for those John Podesta emails.
Yeah, those are
I am maybe even a bit more open.
Those aren't even. That's not QAnon. They jumped off the back of that, but those were from. Yeah, a lot of those were actually from the Julian Assange WikiLeaks. Oh yeah,
no, I know, like, and I'm saying there is no explanation for that. Yeah. There's never been a satisfactory explanation for those code words going on in that, or if it's not code words, what the fuck are they talking about?
$300,000 worth of hot dogs or whatever.
Yeah. Sounds like a crazy party. But that's what I was saying before, where it's not. Here's what I think, as someone who's been into this for a while. If we want to disseminate information to the public, it's not good to lead with the absolute most sensationalist, crazy thing you can think of if you're trying to induct new people. That's more the fun stuff. We could talk about the baby blood drinking. We already know. Totally. But like if you're trying to get your people like Alex Jones, I like Alex Jones. I would have fun hanging out with him. But there's a lot of people that wouldn't have fun hanging out with him. And to see that personality type and to associate that personality type with this kind of critical thinking doesn't do favors to the people like us who want to talk about these things academically, legitimately. You associate it with crazy. I think a figure like Alex Jones
represents kind of the same thing like I was talking about with QAnon. He's this person that he might sprinkle in a little bit of truth here and there in the things he talks about, but ultimately he exists to discredit, to associate these legitimate conversations with batshit crazy dumb stuff, Yeah,
so you just write it all off, and that's like Jones is probably more accurate than mainstream media. If we had like as far as percentage of true facts, there's a lot of bullshit in there. And if anyone saw the documentary, there was a lot of funky shit about Sandy Hook, but the angle he took about it was he didn't go about it in a respectful way.
Sure.
And he didn't go about it in a way that helped legitimize the information to uninitiated people.
Sure, yeah.
Let's keep going through your episodes. You've had 3 with Jack Kruse. We don't have to get into anything. Jack Kruse is an amazing orator.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Jack Kruse is a conspiracy theorist for sure. He's a neurosurgeon. You have had him on 3 times. I love the guy. He says some things I don't agree with, but he's very entertaining. After talking with him 3 times, any highlights from that?
With Kruse, I take kind of a lot of the stuff that he says with a grain of salt, but I think he is really good at tying really broad ideas together in kind of a palatable way. Talking about really big ideas. I think if I had to really guess, I would say his biggest passion is Bitcoin, which I'm not really so much in that. I kind of could care less about it.
Absolutely.
And I understand some of where he's coming from about that, but I just always have to wonder what where his intentions really are, You know what I mean? And
I agree with you. And that's what we talked about. I really liked Catherine Austin Fitts.
Yes,
if anyone is looking for great information on how this how these oligarchs really conduct financial crime. Like Catherine Austin Fitts is absolutely like
rational academic. She's
she was under public housing under the Bush administration for 20 years, and then she litigated with the government for, I think she said 11 years, where they tried to do all sorts of stuff. She is amazing, but even before I had to listen to her, she had a great interview with the author. I don't remember his name, but his book is called Hijacking Bitcoin. And they just got into, and I didn't even have to list, it helped me tie the things together, but I will say there's the days of the naive optimism for Bitcoin being a total use case. Is gone. We're never like, if you understand, like the Bitcoin, the transaction rate is completely limited, not to mention the people, it's not fully scalable because the people kept stake in it. But no, if anyone, because I've met some bullish crypto bros who, they think, like eventually you're going to go in and it's going to be tap to pay with your Bitcoin. Not to mention, it's like now it's like, most of the people that are buying crypto are buying it through an exchange traded fund. We just recreated the same system that we were trying to get away from with Bitcoin. It's like, so I believe can blockchain technology, there's a lot of amazing applications I can envision for blockchain technologies, but it's not going to be Bitcoin at a gas station. It's not set up to work that way. So I am also wary when you definitely meet there's a fanatical Bitcoin personality, a fanatical crypto guy who just says, "Oh, this is the answer to everything to get our sovereignty back." And I don't agree with that, but I definitely would support any kind of blockchain or crypto investment that can help bring public accountability. Imagine if votes were on a blockchain technology or something, so we could tie back where, maybe politicians said they were going to vote one way to their constituents, but now we can see where they got their money from. If we implemented that on blockchain, just an idea of like, we could use this technology for public accountability.
That's the type of thing I envision it being useful for, more than as, an actual currency. And a lot of the people that are so adamant about it, the Bitcoin or the crypto bros, that a lot of these people are the same people that are, talking about governments using central bank digital currencies and stuff, and this fear of digital currency. It seems obvious to me that Bitcoin would be the first one to be used for that. So at the same time that they're so convinced it's going to be the future of money, I feel like it can it can have all the bad elements too, that they're warning about. While at the same time thinking it's going to be this, miracle.
So you can. I will say there's some fanaticism when talking to Kruse, but there's part of it where it would be hanging out with, when I'm listening to the Kruse interviews, it reminds me of hanging out with Alex Jones, where I'm I'll take this with a grain of salt I'll have fun just going on this guy's stream of consciousness ride because it's a fun ride. Regardless. So while I will say, compared to the other guys we've talked about that you've interviewed, I would say Kruse probably doesn't have the same level of like academic integrity, but he makes up for it by being really fun.
Entertaining.
He makes up for it. Let's get through your other ones. Any other ones? There should only be.
I think we talked about
3 Kruse, 2 Kiriakou. That's 5.
Forte,
Tom O'Neill, Atwill, O'Neill, and then Shrek.
I think we might have cut. We didn't go super deep on O'Neill and Shrek, but I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Let me confirm that.
Yeah, the O'Neill and Shrek, that's the one that people talk about the most, and wanting to get those two like in a room or to kind of do a debate, since their viewpoints are pretty, opposed as far as their theories and stuff surrounding the Manson case.
I would love to see that. That would be amazing if you could.
People are always asking that in the comments for those
to facilitate that would be amazing.
I've asked both of them, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. So the closest I think we'll ever get is just listening to them both on their own. So the other 2 that I haven't watched yet, so you will have to fill us in, is Randall Wendell and Nick Bryant. Yeah, Randall wrote a book about JFK. So that episode, we're mostly just talking about Lee Harvey Oswald, the different like mafia intelligence angles and stuff.
Kruse gave a lot of good information on this too.
Yeah, frankly, I would just listen to the Kruse episodes. We
really
go into more detail. I think
for the JFK thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, Kruse has an amazing story too of tying it from his neurosurgery background. Exactly, yeah. So he was actually directly involved with some of these. It was down in Louisiana where Lee Harvey Oswald was. So he actually has some really fucking cool information on this. Even if some of the crypto stuff is a little fanatical, in my opinion. Kruse, I'd love to talk to you, but so don't take it personally. But
other guy, Nick Bryant, he's written a couple books on the Epstein case, but his main book was called the Franklin Cover-Up. He says that he was attempting to write a more academic version of the story. Basically, I think it was in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, the original 80s. Franklin scandal.
And the guy that wrote the original book, the Franklin scandal, John DeCamp, he was a senator. He was involved in it directly. So I think both of them are really good accounts of it. Bryant is maybe a little more on the academic side for sure.
Okay.
But our interview, I mean, we talked about stuff outside of that. Talked about Epstein, talked about, Mossad and like the greater, just the question of blackmail, the Maxwell's
specifically going into sexual blackmail. For anyone who's not familiar with this story, this is an amazing story of, in Omaha, Nebraska, where they, these high-level Republican politicians, I don't remember.
Lawrence King was the main one, yeah.
Lawrence King had a child sex trafficking ring that they were bringing in from was Boys Town, I believe.
They were embezzling money in a credit union and bringing in children from, not just Boys Town, but that was included, which is another interesting, intersection, too, because Charles Manson was at Boys Town for a time when he was a little kid, so... we get into that a little bit in there too, but the Franklin scandal and the Franklin cover-up, both of those books are pretty.
So just with going into that'll get you deep into the territory of how is the politics of sexual blackmail, how do these power players go down, and how is this really used? Right. And you got into that with Kiriakou as well. That was one of my main introductions to conspiracy stuff in general. I liked the sensationalist aspect of it because this is the craziest shit I've ever heard. Yeah. Before that, I was like, it didn't even cross my mind that this was possible. But now that I'm hearing it, it makes so much sense.
Right.
And now it's really giving me a framework. We can see it. So, dude, fucking awesome. I would recommend if anyone was interested in any of the interviews you talked about. Absolutely check them out. You do a great job interviewing the people.
Thank you.
They're very respectful to you. I'm so surprised that they're stoked to talk to you. I was saying, you could tell a couple of the guys had shared a romantic notion of being in a rock band. So they thought it was cool to talk to you just as much as I thought it was cool to talk to them. Let's just, as we're wrapping up, let's say maybe someone checked your shit out and they're like, okay, hold on. This is a little bit over my head. Is there any foundational documents or maybe foundational books or anything that really got you on the path that you think would help lay a foundation for understanding? Because it gets really complex. If you read One Nation Under Blackmail, how many names are in that book?
That's a dense
2,000 names.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It gets hard to follow. So let's go over any foundational texts and anything that would maybe get a normie in.
It depends on what aspect of it you're most interested in. I would say if you're interested in the mind control, social engineering, that type of stuff, the foundational books to read are O'Neill's book Chaos, Dave McGowan's Weird Scenes in the Canyon.
Especially if you're a music guy, absolutely, you need to read this.
Totally. And then Acid Dreams by Martin Lee and Bruce Schlang.
Okay.
That one's really
I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, that one's really good. I think that one's from the 80s or 90s. So that one goes back a while, but it's still pretty foundational. And then The Search for the Manchurian Candidate by John Marks. That's kind of like the definitive MK Ultra book.
Okay.
He was involved in the Senate Church Committee hearings in the 70s when when all this stuff was originally brought to light. So that's pretty source material.
Yeah, again, so just clarify, these are primary sources.
Absolutely.
This is not like, I heard,
These
or
aren't Alex
I was
Jones
my
books
schizophrenic.
either,
Yeah, this is primary sources from people that were involved in legal hearings, that were involved in these programs. This is not fiction.
Yeah. And I would say Whitney Webb's, both of the One Nation Under Blackmail books. I mean, they're
phenomenal.
They're dense and they're a lot, but I mean, they provide an extremely cohesive interpretive framework to view, what's going on in the world right now. I think you absolutely have to read both of those books to understand American politics for the past 70 odd years. Frankly.
What I love about Whitney Webb's books too is not only does she come with all the receipts, everything's cited, all the receipts,
to say the least,
but it demystifies it.
Yes.
Because this isn't, now we're not like, all we're talking about a transnational crime syndicate, which is a lot more believable than
a cabal of Satanists.
And then go beyond that, of lizards, of transdimensional lizards, or whatever, which I'm open to. But not the best thing to lead with. So go on. Those are MK Ultra ones. We can take all this, and there's documents on the CIA website talking about it. They're obviously only giving you a little bit of it, but they're not trying to say this didn't happen. You can have that. So if there's a couple other categories of books, if you were talking about, so you just
stuff related to the podcast. I mean, those are really the main ones.
The MK Ultra stuff.
Read Nick Bryant's books too. The ones on the Franklin scandal.
Whitney Webb's book on Epstein. Epstein is a great primer because it was so public. So Whitney's 2 books. The whole first 500 pages is just setting the scene for Epstein to come in.
If you want a good fiction book that also ties into this stuff, is a book called St. Peter's Snow by a guy named Leo Perutz.
Okay,
and this
I'm not
book was
familiar with
written in the 30s. I think he wrote this. He was one of the original. He moved to Israel in 1904, pretty much around the formation of the state of Israel. I think 1948 or 49 is when he moved there. But this book it's a fictional book. It's set in some far off rural town in Switzerland or something. And essentially the premise of it is this guy, he goes there, he loses all his memory, and then he slowly finds out that there's been this conspiracy going on in this little town where the king or the whatever you would call it, the leader in this town, he commissioned these scientists to create a drug that they could then spray or give to the populace unbeknownst to them to get them back in touch with their spiritual side, essentially. Okay. So this book was written though in the 30s. It was written decades before the synthesis of LSD. It was written 20, 30 years before MK Ultra really came about. So it's really kind of precognitive in a way. It's kind of suspicious, how would this guy have known all of these types of things? It kind of parallels back to what we were talking about Brave New World earlier, how all these things that eventually did happen, they were writing about in these books way back when. But that's a really good one because it essentially lays out the entire, it lays out exactly what they were doing with MK Ultra, the whole point of, the drug experimentation and the populace and stuff. So that's a really interesting one. Hard to find, but it's a good read.
That's awesome. I love the precognitive aspect too. I was just talking about that. We thought, because we investigated Snake Eyes after the Charlie Kirk thing, that was completely unrelated.
Was that the Nicolas Cage movie?
It's the Nicolas Cage movie where the guy is a guy named Charles Kirkland who gets assassinated on September 10th. But the other parallels stop there. There's nothing else that I noticed in the thing. But I took some edibles, so I wasn't incredibly perceptive to the rest of the movie. But it does show. He is a super cocky intelligence guy, and it shows how he goes in at this assassination, and it just shows how they go about getting the press out, how they go about being able to write the story themselves. So it's interesting to see that character. Yeah. He's a really great, super hateable, cocky asshole character. But the only other thing I'll say is just book wise, the Israel thing is very popular right now. I really love Walton Mersheimer's Israel Lobby.
Yes,
I think any American needs to read that book.
John Mearsheimer,
Mersheimer and Walt. Anyone needs to read Israel Lobby. I think Norman Finkelstein's work is great.
Everything by Finkelstein is a must read for sure.
And that's what's so cool about that topic is you could if you have Benny Morris or something, we can have
that'd be interesting.
We can have direct implications of Israel, if you wanted to talk to someone that was incredibly skeptical, it's like we could coordinate it where we give you nothing but Israeli scholars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's important that if we want to disseminate this stuff, like I said, there's different degrees of separation from primary sources. So that's a great book where it's just like, bro, everything's cited. This guy's like a leftist.
Yeah.
Or what, he's an academic.
Exactly.
He's not like he's not even right wing. Yeah, he's not a conspiracy theorist at all.
Not a Christian.
No, not, you know what I mean? Like this, it's like we can get you if you're really good. Same with music. You know what I mean? If you're working with music theory, you can arrive at chords or you can arrive at different things from multiple different avenues. So I think it's good if you want to red pill people. It's like, hey, I'm going to evaluate your level of skepticism, and then I will curate sources for you to read based on what you're open to. So I think it's great for everyone to just have diversity of sources. So like you said, you're going to talk to some people about Israel and they're going to say, I don't want to hear anything from a Christian. I don't want to hear anything from a right-wing guy. Cool. Yeah. Here's Walton Mersheimer. Yeah. Here's Finkelstein. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And then it's like, we could find it from another angle too. So I think that's important to be really patient. What I'll say is, if you're going down this path, be really patient with yourself and other people. Make sure you have your research done well, and please begin to speak about it, because when you talk to other people and other people give you pushback, don't take it as, I was very fanatical about my beliefs when I first started getting into this stuff, and I would take it personally when people wouldn't believe me because it was important to me and it looked obvious to me, but it wasn't to them. My advice for anyone going down the path is just don't take it personally, and understand that having conversations with other people, especially if there's a disagreement, if you can handle that respectfully, it just helps you organize your argument way better, and it helps you organize your information way better. So look for a diverse range of sources, have conversations. Do not let, please, we need to be able to have, we talked earlier, we need to be able to share information with each other. We need to be able to have civil discussions with each other. We are not going to make it as a society if we're at each other's throat over superficialities. We need to be able to collectively come together to understand what's happened and what do we do about it. But we need to learn to cooperate with each other.
100%.
Any other thing you'd like to leave anyone with, maybe newbie red pillars or anything that are getting into anything I didn't cover?
Think for yourself, question authority. I think it all comes down to that, man. That's about it.
Noah, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Sick, man.
Appreciate you.
Of course.